So how are you today, Nick?
Yes, very well actually. We've got a show coming up tonight that I'm preparing for on top of working my job and doing a bit of uni studies. So we're looking forward to that. So it's a busy day ahead.
You've got another show coming up. Can you tell us what the other show is you've got coming up?
Yeah, the other show is a week and a half from now on the 12th of April. It's a Friday. It's at a place called the Beat Nightclub, which is a relatively new venue in Perth. It's only been around for about a year, I think. And that's a single launch for the song Disguises, which was on our EP, which came out last September. So that's what that show's all about.
Yeah. The Arsonist is a band that you and Louis started together.
Yeah.
And was that back in 2011?
We actually started writing a lot of the songs that are on the EP were actually written probably at very early 2009 we actually started. Louis and I have been practically best mates for the best part of 5 or 6 years. And at the time he was in another band. Evidently it was actually with the bass player in our current band. And I had just finished up with my previous band probably at early 2008. So I was actually bandless for a good year and a half. And Louis was sort of writing music on his computer. One day I remember going over to his house, back in 2009, and he was just writing music using a computer program. And it sounded really, at the time, it sounded very computerish. It was very, it was
Electronic.
very electronic synth sounding, yeah, stuff like that. It had a disco element to it, something that I wasn't very used to because I'd come from a heavier background, but I'd always liked, soul sort of disco 80s sort of flavours. So anyway, I went over there one day and he was just sort of mucking around on it while I was talking to his brother. And I just overheard part of a song that he had been writing, and I just asked him to stop it and just replay what he just played. And I just said, "Oh, that sounds really cool." And I, started humming a melody, and he goes, "Oh yeah, that works. Let's work with that." And it very much just started as like a more of a hobby than anything. We never really expected it to go anywhere. Yeah, and eventually we just started, we had 3 or 4 songs in the bag, and it was, out of the sheer love for music, but coupled with a little bit of boredom as well, because we had nothing really to do after work most days. So we just sort of wrote music, and it just sort of went from there.
You're talking about Crysis.
I am talking about Crysis, yeah. I was in a band called Crysis for the best part of 6 or 7 years, I think it was, dating back to the early 2000s or the early noughties, however you want to say it.
And you toured with Karnivool, Cog, Dead Lettuce Circus, the Butterfly Effect.
Yeah. I suppose, back then, one of the major advantages of being in a heavy-ish sort of band is that all these great bands were around. I think out of the bands you just mentioned, I think Karnivool's the only one that's left, unfortunately. Cog, Butterfly Effect. I think, yeah.
No, Dead Lettuce Circus is still going.
Dead Lettuce Circus is still around, yeah, you're right, and going strong as well. So, yeah, I mean, we played a lot of shows with those guys. It was sort of difficult at first to sort of break into that market because there were a lot of other heavy bands around at the time. So we actually found ourselves in a position where we was all of a sudden supporting these bands. And I think after we supported 1 or 2 of them, they all sort of just started talking between them and just said, "Look, if you ever go to Perth, the Crysis boys are the go-to band for a support." So it just sort of rolled on from there, and you just sort of become part of this community, and all of a sudden you're surrounded by so much musical talent, and it was just an amazing time. I still think about it every now and then because I have no idea how it happened.
I was going to ask, actually, if you maybe met someone from one of those bands that sort of got it started, but you don't know.
Okay, it's kind of a long story, but okay, so Louis is in the Arsonist, and he's been my best mate for 5 or 6 years, as I said. How it all worked out is just kind of it's kind of a mind bender. So he has a brother who was in the music industry in another band called Allura Dannon, who were a pretty well-known Western Australian band around 2006-07. Because I was in Crysis, we ended up playing a lot of shows together. And my drummer at the time actually got to know Jay, who was the drummer of Valora Dannon, really well, as drummers form this weird community of love. It's really weird. So they got to know each other quite well, and Jay invited my drummer to a house party one day. And on the night, my drummer asked me if he would like me to come. So I just said, yeah, no worries. It's a bunch of musos. Let's go do it. And so that night I actually met Jay, and he introduced me to his brother Louis and his circle of friends. And it just so happened, well, luckily for Crysis, I suppose, in a way, is that Steve, the drummer from Karnivool, was just part of that circle of friends. And I got introduced to him, and, around about that time, I think all the boys were like really into poker because it was huge on TV, and everyone was talking about poker and playing poker, and they sort of just asked me, do you play poker? And at the time, I was actually quite obsessed with it. They said, look, we have poker nights every Wednesday night. You should come round. And I sort of obliged, and the next Wednesday night I was over there, and then the rest is history, really.
Because you not only made that connection and supported those bands, but you and Steve obviously became very good friends because he's your drummer. That's
right, yeah. So that's another sort of story altogether. Louis and Steve lived together for 3 or 4 years. And as me and Louis were writing all these songs, we sort of said to each other, look, we've got about 10 songs now. How are we actually going to do this live? Because he's going to need to play keyboards, and at the same time there's going to have to be all these samples and noises and all sorts of things happening on stage, and we have no idea how we're actually going to trigger them. And then he was talking to his old bass player, and who's our new bass player, Tim, now, and he just sort of said, look, I've got all this equipment that can make all of this stuff happen. And we said, you're joking. And he goes, no, come over, we'll have a jam, I'll show you what I've got, and we'll take it from there. And so we did. And we went over there, and he showed us all his equipment and said, right, we can actually make this work. This is perfect. All we need now is a drummer. And we sort of said, okay, who do we know? We brainstormed for a little bit. There was a few candidates in the mix, actually. And then we just sort of said, look, this music has a really unique sort of groove. It's going to need a really good drummer. And Louis and I sort of just, conversed back and forth about who we were going to get. And then we just sort of said to each other, look, you know who would be great? Steve would be great, but he's got the whole Karnivool thing going on, and there's no way he's going to be able to dedicate any time to us whatsoever. So we approached Steve and said, would you be interested in just recording the drums on our EP so that the groove's there, and whoever the drummer is that we get in can just sort of follow your parts and then develop their drumming around our newer material afterwards? And he said, at first he said, yeah, no worries, I'll just do the recording, that's fine. And then I think a month or so passed after that, and we sort of just reminded him, and he just sort of turned around and said, well, you know what, I can just drum for you guys if you want. And Louis and I just sort of looked at each other and just said, well, we weren't expecting that. That's fantastic. So that's how Steve joined the band.
And he's still with Karnivool, and they've got an album coming out, so there's going to be, times like probably later this year that you won't be able to work as a band because he'll be off with them.
That's true. He's starting to get really, really busy. He wasn't so busy last year because it was more of a writing process. And I suppose Karnivool and the Arsonist actually share similar writing patterns, I guess. I can't really speak for them, but the way that I perceive them to do it is they do their writing they jam a lot, but then they actually write in stages. So a lot of the writing's done when they're not actually physically together in a room. Which is very similar to the way the Arsonist works. Louis will come up with the base of the song, and then he and I will write a melody and lyrics together, and so that the core of the song is there. And then Tim and Steve will add their bits and just turn it into something that we could have never written. So I suppose on a writing front, it's not going to affect the Arsonist too much because Steve will be away a lot this year on various tours around the world and all that sort of stuff. The only thing that we need to juggle would be actually playing shows either over East or in Perth and sort of judging when he's going to be here and when he's not going to be here so that we can move dates around if need be. That's the risk we took with wanting Steve in the band. And it's a great risk as well because he's, in my opinion, one of the best drummers in Australia, probably one of the best drummers I've ever heard. So
yeah. Oh, well, good time for you to write.
Exactly. And it offers us, good writing time. So, yeah, it's not really an issue at all.
So then we can expect an album from the Arsonist early in 2014.
Well, we've actually decided on going for another EP.
Right.
And I think we're due to record that in May, and Steve's going to be recording, I think, half a month earlier because when we start recording our parts, he'll actually be away. So we negotiated with the producer that he'll record half a month earlier, and then we're going to release it in stages and in a manner that's completely opposite to what we're doing now. We're going to release 2 singles at the end of this year, and then release the EP in March next year.
Right.
And hopefully the 2 EPs will act as a base to continue building our fan base, and then an album will probably come after that.
And Steve actually has the easy job because he's the drummer, whereas you do vocals, samples and percussion.
Yes.
Louis does keys, vocals and guitar.
Yeah.
And Tim does bass, keys and vocals as well.
That's true, yeah. Yes, Steve wouldn't agree with that.
Sorry. At least he can concentrate on one thing.
Yeah, at least he can as well. We're actually trying to get him to sing a little bit more, but I think that's a future aspiration. But yeah, I mean, I suppose triggering samples and playing percussion and all that and singing at the same time and trying to perform as a frontman as well. It takes some getting used to because in my previous band I was just a frontman and a vocalist. So it does take some getting used to, but eventually you sort of stop thinking about it and because it just comes so naturally. You've rehearsed it that many times. So I suppose when you're reading what each band member's doing, it looks a lot more it looks a lot more difficult than what we actually feel we're doing. But all the musos in my band, I just watch them and it's just amazing watching them in the jam room because they're all just so clued in to what needs to happen on a musically structured level, and just the absolute perfection that they have for their instruments. It's just amazing to watch, for me to actually sit back and just watch them do their thing.
You actually formed Crysis in high school and you were only 15 when you started professionally gigging.
Yeah, that's right.
You've got a few years of experience under your belt. I
do. I'm coming up on my 10th year now that you've just said that. I just realised I started in 2003. So, 10 years of gigging. It definitely doesn't feel that way. I suppose the one reflection I could have on that is you never stop learning. You never actually perfect anything because there's no such thing as perfection when it comes to performing or showmanship or anything like that. But you're constantly learning new things. You're constantly learning new ways to engage with your audience. You're constantly seeking feedback, both positive and constructive, from other musicians and other people in the crowd. And it's been a really good 10 years, I guess, and I look forward to many, many more.
Well, that was a young age. Did you come from a musical family?
Not necessarily. No one in my family but 2 cousins actually play any musical instrument, and we've got a big family. I'm actually part of an enormous Italian family,
right,
and full of men, by the way. I think my sister is the only female grandchild, so everyone's a male, and only 2 of them are actually guitarists. One of them is in a fairly popular glam rock band over here in Perth, and the other one actually never joined a band, but he's a phenomenal guitarist, but just never formed a band for some reason. I've never really asked him why. But on a musical front, I suppose the only musical influence that I had when I was growing up was my dad. He's always dabbled in playing bass and always just been interested in music itself, but was never a musician per se. But his influences have significantly influenced my taste in music and what I listen to, and I would say his musical influence has probably formed my interest in the Arsonist more so than what it did with Crysis.
The EP, where's that available now?
That is available through iTunes predominantly. You can also buy it nationwide, I think, at stores like JB Hi-Fi and most national CD retail stores. It's also available through our Facebook page. So there's various outlets you can get it from.
So is that distributed through MGM?
It's distributed through Green Distribution, which is a subsection of MGM Australia. Yeah, it's two different two different business titles, but it's essentially the same distributor.
And people can get it at your show at the Beat nightclub?
Absolutely, yeah. Every show we play, you can get a copy of it.
What date's that one again?
That's the 12th of April, Friday the 12th of April, which is next Friday.
And on Facebook, you are actually in capitals, the.arsonist.
Yep.
And then .Perth, and the Perth is in small letters.
That's right, yeah.
And I will put a link on the Collision Facebook page. So
fantastic.
if people have any trouble finding you don't have an actual website, you've just got your Facebook at the moment? No,
the website's under construction, but it'll just be Facebook for now.
And do you have any videos yet?
We've got, we're actually interesting that you asked us that. We've got the film clip on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, if you just type in The Arsonist and the song title is Breakdown,
right.
which was our first single off the EP. There's a music video to that, and we're actually filming the film clip for Disguises this Sunday.
Right.
So that'll be up on YouTube within a week after that. So when we release Disguises at the Beat nightclub, the video should be available that day or the day after. So we'll have two film clips up on YouTube.
Are you going to tell us what the film clip's going to be like?
All I can say, without giving too much away, would be that if you could picture a really nice-looking bar that all its occupants are wearing somewhere between really formal burlesque-style outfits and just smart party outfits, somewhere between that. And we're all actually wearing cocktail masks that cover half of our face.
Right.
Hence the title of the song. And the only other thing I can say is that there's going to be a whole lot of lip-to-lip action.
Whose fantasy is this?
Definitely not mine. Definitely not mine. Yeah, and a whole lot of affection and love.
Oh, very good. Look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it's good, but it's got sort of a dark twist to it, so it's not completely happy. Yeah, it should be good.
You're very nice to talk to. I look forward to talking again with the new EP and that, and maybe catch up one day at a show.
Thank you, Kat. Honestly, thanks so much. Thanks for your support. I'll see you all over Facebook.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, then. All right. It's been great talking. Bye.
You too.
See ya.
Thanks heaps, Kat. See ya.